On air, online, on demand. Watch AFR when you want, where you want with CN8, the Comcast network.
Hello, everyone. I'm Art Fennell. Thanks, as always, for joining us for The Report. We'll begin with those wildfires out in California. They have now reached record status as the latest and the largest single fire event in California history, and it continues to burn out of control. The officials there say at least 288 wildfires are now still active, and the crews are working overtime to do what they can to try and stop those fires from spreading. Already, nearly 840,000 acres have been destroyed. Many of the residents there are finally returning to their homes to assess the damage that's been done by the fires near the Sierra Nevada mountains, and that fire forced evacuations twice just in the last few weeks. And once those fires are out, the threat of mudslides and flooding increases as the charred earth is left unstable and the rains begin to hit. Meantime, in Washington state, crews are still battling one of the largest wildfires there to strike the southern Cascade Range in decades. Elsewhere, more than 200 people have been allowed to return to their home near Spokane, Washington, after fire crews were able to contain the latest wildfire. At least 20,000 acres were destroyed by this fire. Luckily, though, no injuries have been reported. Investigators are now looking for a cause. Water was the main issue for victims of Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, and you may recall the problem facing those residents was the question of wind versus flood and whether or not insurance would actually cover the damage. Well, I was there, and I witnessed the frustration firsthand.
I want to know what they expect people to do. I paid wind and storm and on contents for 20 years and have never used my insurance.
And now when you need it,
and now
they're
that I
saying
need
you
it,
can't have
they're
it.
telling me that they are not going to pay because it was flood. It wasn't just a flood, it was a surge that pushed the water in. That's what pushed the water in. If it wasn't a surge, I would have just gotten a few shingles off of my house. I wouldn't have gotten water 4 feet in my house.
Is that fair?
Well, I don't know that it's fair, but the companies collected a premium for wind damage. They did not collect a premium for flood damage. The National Flood Insurance Program, which is subsidized by the federal government, did that. That was done back in the 60s in order to keep the price for homeowners down. If you had the flood component in every policy sold in this country, people think their homeowners insurance is expensive now, it would really be expensive. So it was separated out, and so those determinations do have to be made.
That was Robert Woolley. He since lost his job at the Insurance Commission in Louisiana and the results in the aftermath of what happened at Katrina. Again, that was 3 months after Katrina had hit, and the huge issue of the wind versus flood continued even into this year when I returned and I posed that question again. So much was said about the wind versus the rain. A lot of debate over that. The people who own the properties said it didn't matter to them. They just needed to be remedied for what had happened. But the insurance companies said it made all the difference in the world to them. Where does that stand now?
Okay, the insurance policy basically says that we will pay for damage caused by wind-driven rain, and that was where a lot of the catch was. But we don't pay for flood. In this area, it was contended, and I don't know if this is right or wrong.
This area was completely flooded, though.
It was completely flooded, but it was contended there was not a lot of wind damage here. If you go to Mississippi, there was a big argument over what was wind and what was flood. Here, there was not as much flood damage, or as much wind damage, excuse me, but there was a whole lot of flood damage. Flood generally is not covered under your homeowner's insurance policy. You have to buy a separate flood policy for it.
Right there is what we're going to be talking about, because now insurance companies are looking to combine wind and flood coverage as a solution to this problem in the future, a possible solution. Joe Case of Nationwide Insurance joins me now to talk more about the possibility of this joint policy. First of all, thank you for being here.
Good morning, Art.
And secondly, explain to me just how this joint policy would work.
Well, Nationwide is asking Congress to allow it and other private insurance carriers to sell flood insurance and wind insurance combined in one policy. Right now, you have to buy those coverages in two separate policies under the current framework in which we do insurance business in the United States, and that has created coverage gaps for many Americans across the country, whether they're on the coast suffering post-Katrina, even people in Iowa, in Missouri, in Kansas right now who are suffering from the Midwest flooding. We know that many people don't have flood insurance, and that's a big coverage gap that we're trying to close.
And it seems to me that, Mr. Case, particularly for the second time around and what's happening in Iowa and Missouri, after you saw what happened in the Delta, down in Louisiana and down in Mississippi, you would think that if you live in a flood-prone zone that you would have to go out and get this flood insurance.
Yeah, so you would think that would be the case, but the Insurance Information Institute conducted research just earlier this spring that shows that less than 1 in 5 Americans who need flood insurance have it. In Iowa, less than 1% of Iowans have it. So there's a tremendous number of people out there who own homes who are suffering flood damage, but they don't have the coverage in their insurance policy to help them recover. And that's what Nationwide is trying to address in this policy proposal that we put forth at the end of June.
Right. Wind versus flood. Now, correct me here, because, you know, I don't know. I must be off my rocker or something. But if it was as easy as just combining those coverages, you know, you can get flood coverage and wind coverage, and now you've got it all. Why wasn't this done a long time ago? Well,
it's been a public policy debate that's older than probably most of us that are dealing with it today. This is something that's as old as the insurance industry. The private industry has not been willing to cover flood damage because when it happens, it's so widespread. And back in 1968, the issue came to a head, and the federal government decided to create the National Flood Insurance Program. That's created the system that we have today, where you have to buy a separate flood policy. And what we're finding is people just don't buy it. And then there's a coverage gap after the fact, and we have people who are exposed. And that's why Nationwide's trying to come up with a new framework, an innovative framework that would allow insurance companies to have that comfort level to write this type of coverage and know that if a major event happens, they're not going to go under, so to speak, in terms of being able to pay claims, and that there's going to be an appropriate federal safety net in place that will help cover everybody's expenses, rather than the paradigm we have today where taxpayers are left on the hook to bail out the National Flood Insurance Program.
Sure, and give some peace of mind to the homeowners and the policy owners, too. Finally, I got to ask you about those fires, and I want to veer off just a bit here.
Sure.
Because those fires are burning out in the West. We just put those on and just wreaking havoc out there. Now, and we were just there, by the way, but once those fires have burned out, I understand that then when the rains come, the mudslides become a major event at that point, and a lot of people don't have mudslide coverage, although they might have fire protection. So are they trapped too?
That's right. Just like your traditional homeowners insurance does not cover floods, it traditionally doesn't cover earth movement either, because it's such a tough risk to calculate premium against. The best advice that we can give to people is go talk to your insurance agent, see if you can build that type of coverage into your policy. The coverage is there in most instances. It's just a matter of having the conversation with your agent and being willing to pay the premium so that you have that coverage, so that you're not left with a gap if something unfortunate happens.
Well, but is that premium going to come at a premium? Is it something that a lot of people just simply may not be able to afford?
It may be an affordability issue for some people, but generally speaking, we find that people who live in homes that are in these precarious situations, many times they are able to afford it, but in terms of trying to balance the monthly budget to make ends meet, they decide to make decisions that make coverage gaps in their policies. So we recommend talk it over with your agent and get all the information you can and make a well-informed judgment, and don't, as they say, cut your nose off in spite of your face just to save a couple of bucks on your monthly budget.
Yeah, well, those gaps in coverage had people fighting mad down after Hurricane Katrina, and I was there, heard from them, and I know that they were not happy with the insurance industry. So anything that can help will certainly be a blessing for them. Joe Case, thank you very much, and he's with Nationwide Insurance. They've got a proposal on the table to try and change that.
Thanks, Art.
Okay.